I'm on slide 12 or 13 changing a word. Yep, just one word. And I want to tell you carefully this next part, because at the time I would have told you that I was just being thorough. I was preparing, and that this was a big meeting and I was doing the work I'm supposed to be doing. And that's what I would have said, right? But what's actually happening, because nobody runs a deck 3 times at 3 o'clock in the morning unless something else has gone wrong. And the thing that had gone wrong wasn't actually in the deck. And I'll tell you what happened the next morning later. But before I go any further, I want to do something real quickly, because very often I get introduced as a man who raises money or helps people with their capital raising. And that's not what this is about, because we're all raising something, okay? Some of you are trying to land a client. Some of you are trying to recruit somebody, a partner into your business who has options and knows it. Some of you have a round to close, and some of you have never used the word round in your life, because it's all the same transaction. You see what I mean? Wearing 3 different outfits. And in every single case, a human being is deciding whether to commit something scarce to you: money, time, or their own reputation. It's the same mechanism every time. So if I slip into the language of capital raising, please accept my apology for that. It's the industry I come out of, right? Because you're running 2 businesses right now, and most of you don't actually know it. So whether your version is A, B, or C, just write yourself into it, okay? Because the thing that I got wrong in that hotel room at 3 in the morning is the thing that most people in this room and every room I step into are getting wrong right now, and nobody has a name for it. So let me quickly make sure that I can get you. 1 second. There we go. That's what I want. So I remember this point really clearly, and I think it's probably the best place to start, because this fund manager, very famous guy now, came to us at the end of his roadshow. And David had a resume of a stone tablet, like Goldman, Harvard, 15 years in one of the most important seats on Wall Street. And he built a deck that ran 147 slides. And he had booked 15 meetings, 15 family offices, and he actually flew to every single one of them. And he performed absolutely on schedule, on message, every single time. And he raised nothing. Not a small amount, nothing. Nada, zero, zilch, gar nix, okay? And somebody had referred him to us, and we met him after his 15th meeting. And I remember Laura Louise asking him, "David, who are you?" And of course, he started telling us about his fund, his strategy, his returns, some very impressive Greeks. And like, no. Not what do you do? Who are you? And it's so interesting because he couldn't answer. Here's a grown guy who couldn't answer. 15 years in the best seat in the house, 2 of the best names of finance on his resume, 147 slides, and the man couldn't answer the same question of who are you? And in the same market, same year, a 22-year-old intern literally raised $3 million in 4 days. And I know that's not a lot by these terms, but he went into his meetings with 6 of my coffee-stained napkins. And as Laura Louise will tell you, I have them everywhere. I think I always advise people, if your business doesn't fit on one of these, it doesn't deserve to go on a slide deck either, right? And I want you to hold both of these people in your head next to each other, because everything that I'm going to say for the next 25, 30 minutes is going to live in the gap between them. And what I want you to notice about David, and it's quite important because almost everybody gets it backwards, right? There was absolutely nothing wrong with his pitch. The slides were clean, the numbers were real, the strategy was sound. I mean, if you'd handed that deck to a consultant, they would have told you, yes, that's great work. Obviously, they would have critiqued it and added another $50,000 on it. But not one of those family offices, right, could have told you what was wrong. If you called them afterwards and said, "Hey, why didn't you allocate?" they would have said, "Oh, it's a valuation, it's a timing, it's a fit, it's a strategy," all that kind of stuff. And they aren't lying to you. They genuinely didn't know the answer either. But what happened in those 15 rooms didn't happen in the content. It actually happened in the first 90 seconds. Before anybody looked at a slide, and it happened at a level in the room that nobody was consciously tracking, you see? Because every single person deciding whether to write you a check, sign your contract, put their name next to yours is running the same background program. And it runs before your logic even gets a hearing. And it's asking one question: how desperately does this person need this to work? And that's it. That's the program. Because here's the part that I find generally actually unfair about it. And I've kind of made peace with it, and I suggest you do too. Because need is a smell. You see what I mean? Nobody can define it, yet everybody can detect it inside a minute. So if you think of these guys, all right, it doesn't announce itself, it leaks. And it leaks in the same handful of places every time. The deck gets longer. Every uncertain founder at some point reaches for one more slide, one more chart, one more proof point, one more thing. David's 147 slides did not sell him. They confessed him. Then the follow-up gets faster. You know, like a same-day thank you is generous, but a same-day thank you followed by two more before the first one gets a reply is literally a distress signal wearing a suit. And the terms literally very often get sweeter before anybody asks. I don't know if you've ever been in a big negotiation, right? Nobody negotiated you down. You did it all by yourself in advance because you could not sit inside an unanswered question. And the word just does the leaking for you. Just 15 minutes of your time. How often do you guys get those on LinkedIn? Oh, just following up, just checking in with you. Just give me 15 minutes of your time. The word just is literally an apology wearing the costume of a request. So if you read this list again on your own time, none of it is a lie. Every item on it is some small, honest overcorrection for a fear that they might say no, which is exactly why it shows up as evidence, okay? And that's really where I want to go to. Because I want to tell you where I learned this. I didn't learn it from a book. I came into financial services in my 20s in Hong Kong, and I was promised absolutely great training, and what I actually got was a phone book. Literally, I dumped it on the table, an actual phone book. A guy with a very posh English accent threw it on my desk and said, put those toys away, start dialing for dollars. Your training starts today. And that was it. That was the training. So here I am, living with 3 kids in the world's most expensive city, nothing behind me, no reputation, nothing, basically working a script that had already stopped working for the 3 guys who had it before me, right? And I did what everybody does in that position. I performed. And I borrowed a version of confidence that I had not yet built. I put on the voice. I got good at the voice, actually. That's the part that should worry you, right? And I ran that cycle for years before I had a name for it. And when I finally did, I called it the BBB, 3 Bs. Bullshitting. Bullshitting my way past the parts of the pitch that I didn't believe. Begging for a callback I had done nothing whatsoever to earn. And badgering a stranger who was never going to be a fit for me in the first place. That's the 3 Bs. And after almost every one of those calls, I kept saying the same sentence to myself. There must be a better way than this, Anrik. This is torture. And it literally took me another decade actually to find it. And what nobody tells you about performing, and this part is really important. So if you take one thing away, it's the next few minutes. Because I need you to actually hear it. Once you become aware of it, you cannot unsee this. Because it's kind of the exit that most people are reaching for right now. Faking it is not free, because it costs processing power. Think of yourself as a computer, an old, 386 computer. The same processing power that you need to be in the moment, to be absolutely truthful, to be absolutely authentic, to be in the spot and really understand that person is being absorbed. You see what I mean? Because a performed answer arrives half a beat late, because somewhere behind your eyes, you're checking the answer against the story that you've already told before you let the words out, right? And this little half beat is not invisible. You cannot see it. You can never see it because you're the one paying for it. But the person across the table, they see it every time because they're not paying for it. It's like that little laugh that lands half a second after the joke because you were computing, because before the room expected you to find it funny before you let yourself find it funny. You see what I mean? It's like even the answer that's too complete, too structured. Humans don't talk like that. We don't work like that. We're not perfect. You see what I mean? And that is for a question you supposedly didn't see coming. And what people do, they practice, but practice does not fix this. Practice makes the performance go smoother, which makes the gap between the performance and the person underneath it even harder to see, but easier to feel, and it erodes trust. So a more polished performance, right, of confidence is still a performance. It just took longer to build. So you've got to see the processing power that it takes, right? And the trap you got to see is that sometimes it works. Somebody believes the costume, they write the check, they sign, because the version of you that you performed for them was, on that particular day, bravo, exactly convincing enough. And that's where I'm getting to, because it's worse than a no. You see, a no just costs you an afternoon, but a performed yes costs you years. Because the person on the other side of it, right, they didn't actually commit to you, to the real you. They committed to a character, a thing you showed up as, that you played for 2 hours. Now, if you guys know this, right, and I think all of us here have a lot of gray hair in the room or no hair, how often have you had the wrong partner or the wrong client and you thought, great. And I tell you, the wrong money, the wrong investor, the wrong partner is a shitty loan with terrible consequences. Sometimes it sets you back 10 years. A no is super much cheaper, right? So back to the kind of character play, because now if you've showed up as a character, now you owe them a sequel. Every update, every renewal, every quarterly call, you got to get back in costume, maintaining that version of yourself, right? That was never sustainable for somebody who's never actually met the real you, versus a real you that lets you go find the yes that was actually meant for you. A performed yes locks you into manufacturing a version of yourself indefinitely. And this is deeper than today's conversation. That's how most executives that we coach and business owners that we help, they have so many layers and layers and layers of bullshit wrapped around them that it takes us sometimes 2 weeks just to undo that, because they actually buy their own bullshit. Anyway, I don't want to make this meeting too long. So I want to ask you guys a quick question, and I want to see actual hands, like these things, right? How many of you guys, before an important meeting, actually prepare your pitch or prepare your presentation? Let's see it. I got to put my own hand down. All right. So we got about half in the room 1 and slightly more in room 2. Okay. So don't worry, you can put the hands down now. But now let me ask you another question. How many of you actually prepare your questions of what questions you're going to ask? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Because here's the thing. You prepare for one business, yet you walk into another one. And I watched this happen over dinner, actually, in Mayfair. Private dining room that we had set up. This was when I was still at Kenmar. You know those restaurants where there's no menus on them, those type of things. And they have a private dining room, and the whole thing was set up, right? Beautifully done. On one side of the table, an allocator who was, at that point managing about 20 billion in alternatives. And on the other side with me was a manager who now runs about 30 billion today. Very, very famous guy. But back then he was raising, and he needed the money, and he needed the introduction. Sure, he had a great bio. He had a great resume, came from one of the most famous firms, but nobody thought that he could run money. And for the first 10 minutes of this meeting, he did what almost everybody does. He led with his track record. He explained his edge. He made the case for why his fund deserved the allocation, and the allocator was nodding and sipped his wine and nodding and sipped his wine and said almost nothing. And literally, I could see this thing happening in real time because he was talking himself out of the room. One beautiful credential at a time, because every sentence about his own brilliance told the allocator that he needed this particular yes. So I intervened and I turned the whole conversation around, not to him, but to the allocator. And I asked the allocator something that at the time put his world at the center of the table instead of the pitch. And he really leaned forward and he started talking about all the managers who had disappointed him. And there was some very colorful language, the strategies that he thought were overcrowded, and what he wished that somebody would do differently. And the manager at the time, to his enormous credit, actually shut up and listened. And by the end of that dinner, the allocator was asking him the questions. And the dinner actually did lead to a significant allocation. And I wish we'd gotten a bigger, agreement with him in place. But the only thing that changed between minute 10 and minute 40 is that he stopped needing anything from the man across the table. And here's why that happens. And it's not because we're all lazy or badly trained. It's because we're running two completely different businesses with one playbook. And hear me through this, because business A, right, is the thing that you're actually good at. It's your zone of genius. It's the thing you do at 2 o'clock in the morning without being asked. It's whether it's deploying capital, building the product, running the deal, whatever it is that made you good enough to be in this room today, right? And most of you guys are excellent at business A. Some of you are world class at it. But business B, okay, which is attracting the clients, the investors, and the partners who make business A possible. That's the part I want to get into, because what almost everybody does, you spend 20 years mastering business A, and then you take that mastery and you walk it into business B, and you expect the same thing to work. And it doesn't work. It's never worked, because business A is where your worth gets built, your bio, all of the stuff, and business B is where it gets transmitted. They are not the same skill, and they are barely related. And when I figured this part out, everything changed for me, because most people in any room are worthy, super worthy in business A, but they're desperate in business B. And they have never once noticed that those are two completely separate businesses, okay? And that's why I love my initials, AB. A plus B equals AB. Anyway, it's nice. I have my own emojis on keyboards. I really, really do love it. But I want to get to the next point, because the thing that I actually believe, and it's the thing that I want you to write down, if you're going to write anything down today, is that capital moves to people who show that they deserve it and are worthy of it, but are not desperate for it. And when I say capital, I mean people, I mean clients, all of those things, okay? And you see those people. I mean, there are some people that are just marvelous at it, and people just throw billions of dollars at them. And the rest of us are like struggling with it, right? So with that in mind, read that sentence again. Capital moves to people who show that they deserve it and are worthy of it, but are not necessarily desperate for it, right? Because sure, they might need the capital, but they're not going to beg for it because there are others who are going to jump on that opportunity, who are going to jump on that moving train. And when you read that sentence again tomorrow in your head, there's a word in it that misses it because they're not going to beg for it. You see what I mean? The whole part is because, and that's the word, because there are others who will jump on the opportunity. And the problem is sometimes it's the first meeting. So how do you know there's others? You have to build it, be worthy of it, have faith in it, and realize that you are good enough and others will jump on it. You don't need to be desperate for these first 2 or 3 checks. In the book, I actually have a formula and so on that makes it a lot easier to figure it out. Because I'm not telling you to stop needing the money. You need the money. That's why you're here, right? That's why you get into these rooms. That's why you read these kind of books, because it's super important. And I'm not saying that begging is not a character flaw, but it's what happens when there's only one door, okay? And that is the problem behind this. Because if you look what's on the screen, it's literally the least emotional slide in the whole talk. And it's the one that actually explains everything. I got to lose this sweet. My throat feels better now. I'm recovered. I can go back to coffee. Because if you look at the screen, right, the top line is how badly you want this specific yes. That's a constant. It doesn't move. Wanting it less is not available to you. You see what I mean? And I wouldn't ask you to try. But the bottom line is, how many other live conversations do you have running right now? If you shrink the bottom number to 1, right, and the whole thing goes to infinity, no matter how calm your voice is, it's going to fail. But grow it to 20 or 200, and then the identical want that is still there, the exact same hope for this exact same deal basically becomes a rounding error. And this is where AI is so incredibly powerful, is that you can take your voice, as long as it's based on your authentic voice, and maybe we'll get Laura Louise right at the end to give us a little insights into that, of how we actually do that. You can now extrapolate and leverage and multiply your authentic voice and put it in front of 1,000 people who are all considering you. And you remove that desperate need and that desperate scent of, I need this thing to work, because you can't talk yourself out of a fraction. You can only change what's underneath it, right? And when you look at 2 people, right, they can want the same outcome with identical intensity. The one that's radiating calm and the other radiating desperation. The only difference between them is that number sitting in the background that nobody in the room can see, but everyone in the room can feel it and smell it. Okay, so 2 practical things, and then I'll move on from this point. I'm over-talking it. Run your conversations in parallel, never in series, okay? In series means you talk to the first one, then you wait to hear back, and then you start the second one, and so on. Because every day you wait is a day that bottom number sits at 1. And you have to set a floor, a number of live conversations below which you refuse to take a meeting. Most people land somewhere between 5 and 10. And the part that you've got to watch yourself for is when you catch yourself thinking, oh, if this one falls through, I have nothing. That's not a feeling you want to push past. All that is a structural gap. And you have to basically mind hack yourself, because you can close that gap by opening another conversation, opening another conversation, opening another conversation. You want to at all times have 10 fires running, that you have 10 major opportunities running, and people on the other side of the table will feel that. I know I'm supposed to make this very scientific and give you the proof, but when you have 10 options in the fire, the person on the other table is going to feel that, and they are going to start interviewing to get into your circle. Whereas if they are the number one thing and the sun sets and everything dies if they don't jump into this deal, they will know that too. So let me progress, because the fix is not necessarily attitude, it's just another door. So a quick show of hands a little bit, and I know we've got Jeff in here who's a car guy, and Laura Louise and I, we do this in rooms where there's at least 100 people in them, and we always do this. And we go, okay, who is thinking of buying a car this year? I know the year is almost gone, but I'm always thinking of buying a car, and my wife is always thinking of buying a car. Okay, and whenever we do this, okay, let me just count them. It's kind of the same numbers. And today we're not enough people here to make this statistically viable, but it's always about 10% out of 100, right? And we've run that in rooms on 5 continents, and it comes out to the same thing all the time, because the other 90 are not shopping. They're not comparing models, they're not reading reviews, and they will not be for months or for years, right? Now, everybody goes and tries to sell to the 10 with a hand in the air. And you're fighting every dealership in town for the same 10 people in the room where everybody already knows they're being sold to and has their guard all the way up, okay? And clients, capital partners run on the identical split. Most people spend every hour of the week fighting over the visible 1 in 10 in the most crowded and most price-sensitive room on the market. There are people like, if you're raising money from family offices and so on, or hedge funds or VCs or private equity, they're the people on the lists. And right now, everyone's promising you a list on LinkedIn. Comment the word Claude, and I'll send you the list. And I'm still on those lists with my Hong Kong address. Okay, it's embarrassing. Okay, but everyone is trying to sell to those same 10 people, and it was never really the market. It's the fraction of it kind of primed to negotiate you down. You see what I mean? And the uncomfortable part of that is that it just connects you straight back to this, right? Availability is legible from the outside. If you will take any investor, any client, any partner, the market can tell that inside one conversation. And it doesn't read as flexible, it reads as desperate at needing whoever walks through the door. And that is why you have to really know your ideal client. And the more, we can never spend enough time on this with our clients. You can just keep going and keep going and keep going until you get closer and closer and closer, right, to the dot. Because naming who you're for is actually quite easy and harmless to do. And everybody, has a slide about their dream customer and so on, and most people don't actually enforce it. If you show up with a big check, yeah, I'll take it, okay? And the proof of it is not actually a sentence. It's a visible, costly act of turning real business away. So if you actually say no to a funded, willing to write a check investor, it actually costs you something you can measure. And nobody eats that cost for show. So the market reads it as true when it happens. And what we do is we say yes. So saying yes to everyone costs you nothing today, which is why it doesn't prove anything today. Okay, this is a deep point here. You do not know who you are for until you know who you are not. So if you've been in our training and we do, your right fit client matrix, I think, Robert, you'll remember that. I will come straight out the gate and say, let's first start as who do you not serve? Who will you not serve? And number one, it makes the exercise much easier, but it's actually quite authentic because by eliminating those people first. See, magnets have 2 functions. They attract and they repel. If you don't know who you want to repel, you don't actually really know who you want to attract, right? And you want to flip that exercise when you're doing this tomorrow. Don't write the paragraph about your perfect client. Write the paragraph about the client you will decline. Like the hell no. And be ready to say it to their face without flinching. And that's the whole test. And there's a diagnostic that I actually originally learned from Joe Polish. And it's called ELF. And he has these acronyms. And I love that acronym because it just stuck with me. ELF, E-L-F. And it stands for easy, lucrative, and fun. So when you score your last real business conversation on all 3 of those, and you just go, okay, easy. Did they already understand what I did, or did I spend the whole meeting explaining to myself from zero? You see, a right fit prospect never makes you explain from zero. Lucrative. Did the number match what the relationship will actually cost you, or did you discount it before somebody asked? And then fun. Did you leave, this is the important part, did you leave with more energy than you walked in, or with less? Because there are some people that write checks, but they cost you. They cost you dearly. They cost you really, really badly. And when you're really young, you take energy and health for granted. But at our age, you got to conserve your energy and you got to put it to where it counts. And there are people, I call them energy vampires. Man, they just suck the life out of you. And you have to cut those people, because this third one is the tell that matters the most, because the energy doesn't lie about fit, even when your own reasoning and your own slides are busy talking you into the deal, okay? And I think that's the important part of it, right? I don't know if you guys remember the you've been in our training where you remember the kintsugi kintsugi training, right? About the Japanese bowls, right? And I mean, there are people who spend tens of thousands of dollars on these vases, and they shall remain nameless. Okay, um, especially in 2008, right? And I remember a dinner that we had that Laura Louise and I had, and she was wearing a stunning suit and in the 6-inch heels and doing the whole thing. You know what I mean? And we got deep into a conversation about demand and supply, and the world was just crashing around us at the time. And I remember the point in there. There were people that were just buying up everything in sight, and there was so much money. You couldn't tell that Lehman was failing. And Laura Louise always has a very, very good angle on big picture flows. I mean, if she has one skill that she's not aware of, is to see the big world, and she moves in big circles with people. And you realize that your mindset and how you feel is everything, and how you show up in a meeting, and whether you feel desperate or whether you feel worthy is everything. And Laura Louise made a point at the dinner that I still remember that, yeah, there are people literally smiling right now about the whole Lehman thing because they are just buying everyone who panics, everyone who's desperate, everyone who's applying for jobs, everyone who thinks the world is falling. There's a small group of guys out there that are just absolutely smiling, and they're gobbling up everything in sight. And that's when I first kind of became aware of nothing's different between the two people and the two groups. It's how you show up. It's how you feel. It's how you turn up. And at that point, we started introducing the concept of the kind of kintsugi art in Japan. Basically, it's like when a piece of pottery breaks, basically the potter doesn't hide it, right? He doesn't sand it flat, doesn't glaze over it, doesn't try to hide the whole scars, right? The potter fills the breaks with gold, and literally that becomes an art piece, because that break, once it's repaired, is literally the most valuable part of the object. And nobody in 2008 kind of realized that. And we woke up to it where we're like, the people that come out of this, the people that dig their way out of these holes, out of these breakages, they are going to be the most valuable people in the room. Because if you can really be focused and start weaponizing your scars and start bringing that to the table, okay? Because all of us in this room, we've been trained since we're about like 23 years old, okay? That the way you get somebody to trust you is polish. Go get the credentials, get the logo on the slide, get the case study, get it formatted properly, smooth it out. And I want to tell you why that fails. And it's not a moral argument, it's actually an information argument, because everybody applying for this kind of trust has the same credentials. And it came down to that dinner in 2008. I think we were at Per Se. The MBA, the right employer, all the stuff, the deck with all the right logos in the case studies section. And polish is not a signal. Polish is actually camouflage, and camouflage looks the same on everyone wearing it, right? So that brings me back to the David conversation. David didn't fail on presentation. David had better polish than the kid with my napkins. Yeah, I mean, by a factor of like 1,000 or 1,000,000. The napkins weren't better organized. They weren't even close. But the napkins had a human being on them that nobody had bothered to erase. And the 147 slides had basically erased David clean out of his own pitch. And the thing that cannot be faked, right, that's why I have this up here, is a survived failure. You cannot manufacture one. You cannot go and buy a credential and can hire a designer and rehearse the story. You cannot buy a scar. They're earned, and everybody across the table knows that on contact. But you've got to be specific about how you use it, because there's a version of this that fails badly, right? And it's the version that most of us have been taught. Do not tell it as a redemption story. The one where the collapse becomes the triumphant lesson and the room is now supposed to admire your growth and all that thing. Think Russell Crowe movie, okay? Because that version has been performed so many times that it now reads exactly what it is, a performance, right? Now, if you think of the 4 steps here, and I'll give you guys copies of all of this stuff, there's 4 parts to it. And it stops before it goes into a theater. You've got to actually say what it cost you in real terms. And this is the part that's hard for people. Okay, because our scar tissue that we've earned, it actually cost, it hurt, okay? And you've got to actually say what it cost you. whether it's money or years or relationships or whatever. And the mistake that I used to do, I used to round it down to make myself a little more comfortable. That is the important part. What did it cost you? And then the key is in step 3 is say the one thing that you now do differently. One concrete change, like one actual thing, not a philosophy, not some yada, 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 one actual thing. And then you stop talking. And this is the hardest part, because no lesson, no bow, no applause, I mean, no inspirational, motivational guru slide at the end, I mean, it's literally like, I blew up my first fund. It cost me 2 years, most of my savings, and all of my friends. And it was all as a result of having the wrong investor in. I now require 3 totally independent references before I take a partner's capital. Full stop. That's a concrete thing. I know I'm making a light example of it, you know what I mean? But it's a concrete thing because nothing in that is asking to be admired. It's just true, it's specific, and it's finished. And it's the finish that makes it land. This is the part that's so hard to do. It's finishing at it, because if you keep talking, they don't switch modes. They're still thinking you're pitching. This is the biggest giant door you give them, because they will lean in with themselves. And it's uncomfortable because sometimes you've been so busy talking that they don't realize that it's their turn, okay? And if you do one exercise right now in your head, and you don't have to say it out loud, okay? Just think of one failure, right? Let's involve you and your brain a little bit here. Just think of one failure, a real one that still costs you a little something if you were to say it out loud, okay? Just think of one. Give me the thumbs up when you've got it in your head. If you don't have a thumbs up, then I know you either have me on mute or, Laura Louise, you got a failure? And marrying me is not one of them, okay? Don't pick that. That's not fair. So you want to now say another sentence. Because of that failure, I now know this. Which means this for the people I work with. It's one of the most powerful sentences. Nobody wants to do it, but just try and do this. Because of this failure, ... I now know this. And this stuff works really great, by the way. Book, pen, works great. Because then you can finish the next sentence, which is the money sentence, which means ... for the people I work with. And it is such a genuine statement. If you don't have time to prepare for a really big meeting and you just do this step, you are armed. You have the greatest armory in your stable, because everything else from that will come genuine. Everything else will happen naturally. And you don't want to fluff this. Make that real, because if you can actually complete that sentence without flinching too much, you really have something, and it's a teaching scar, and it's worth more time than every line on your resume, because nobody else in your market can copy it. They weren't there. Quick warning, and it matters more than the mechanics, because it only works if the failure is real and the cost is real and the cost is honest. Because the second we men especially, we do this. We round it down to soften the loss. So, we're tough guys. We can take it. We're supposed to be the tough guys, right? But the moment you round that number down too much, or soften that loss, or reach for a failure that's just impressive enough to sound humble, okay? Like I have one. Some guys, when I first started making money, offered me this thing called SMS texting, and I could buy all the rights for all of Africa for SMS texting. And I'm like, what the hell is that? Why would I want to use my phone? Do you remember when we used to press AAA, BBB, CC to complete the thing? I'm like, why would I want to send people messages across the phone when I can just call them? Anyway, that's not a real cost, because it's just one of those things you say at a dinner party. I mean, that's not a real cost, because you want to have built something real and not just replace a brand new performance to replace an old one, okay? So when you think of that with the kintsugi thing, right? A bowl painted with gold lines that was never actually cracked is not art. It's just a lie with good lighting, and the room can tell. Every time, just as fast. So Everything up until this point has been about removing the need. And the rest of this is about what becomes available once it's gone, right? And this is the first thing. So there is an older, faster system running in every person you sit across from, and it runs before your logic gets a hearing. And its only job is to decide, in about the same time that it takes to read one sentence, whether the thing in front of it is worth the attention or safe to ignore, okay? Hear me through this whole thing. Because it doesn't evaluate your projections. It cannot. It has not handed you off to the part of the brain that reads projections yet, and it will not until it decides if you are worthy of the handoff. Okay? I want to get this point across here. You're not worthy of the handoff yet. So don't go with that, right? You want to look at these three guys here, okay? Because there's three things. It's like a gear on a combination lock that open that vault. There's three things that open that door. Novelty, for something it didn't predict. Relevance, something touching the problem that the listener is already carrying in his head, that he's already aware of. And tension. That's the gap it needs closed before it can relax. And if you miss all three of them in your opening line, and you are reciting to a closed door, never mind how good slide 12 is, okay? Because those five at the bottom are the credentials that everyone was taught to say. 35 years of experience. The listener hears, validate me, validate me, validate me, validate me. The gratitude. Thank you so much for your time. The listener hears, ooh, he's just a supplicant. And the balance of power in the room adjusts before you get a chance to say your second sentence. The context. Let me start with the market. 3 minutes on your firm and the market before you arrive at the point. The listener filed it under seminar disguised as a sales pitch. Then the flattery. I'm a huge admirer. Unearned praise. I mean, you guys in the room that work with serious people with money. Unearned praise reads as a threat wearing a smile because it usually precedes an ask. Okay? People with real power, they know this. They might not have intellectualized it, but they know it, right? And then the apology. That's the last one down here. Sorry to take up your time. You know what I mean? The listener hears even this person doesn't think it's worthy of the time. So you just killed the whole game. Boom, in the whole thing. And those five are not necessarily bad writing. They're basically what a person who still needs the yes desperately says, because gratitude and credentials and context are what you reach for when you are afraid that the point alone is not enough. And I have learned this. I make this mistake regularly, and I have learned it to the point where I have to write myself a reminder. Stop thanking people for their time. What, is my time less valuable than yours? Come on. Yeah, man. You should be really lucky that I'm investing my time today, because you want to test your opening, and it actually costs you nothing. And Laura Louise and I, we learned this from, oh man, he's dead now. Laura Louise will tell me. She's my memory brain. Chet Holmes. That's where we first learned this. And he built 6 of Warren Buffett's big divisions. And he was quite amazing, right? And he would set the scene basically like this. He goes, okay, Friday afternoon, picture a stadium, 50,000 seats filled with exactly all the people you most want across the table from you. Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock. Anyone is free to leave whenever they want. Outside, there are beautifully dressed girls giving away free beer and hot dogs and trying to encourage people to leave the stadium. So now you have the microphone, okay? Whatever sentence makes that entire stadium look up, not because they're being polite, that's your 7 seconds. Everything else you've prepared after that is a slide. And slides do not get a hearing until the door is open, okay? Because you've had this conversation more times than you can count. Somebody at a dinner asks for the plain version, okay? What do you do? This is the killer question. And I know, if you've been in my rooms, I talk about this all the time, because the answer runs long every single time. You mention the fund, you mention the years, you mention a client story that needs 3 sentences of a setup before it means anything. 4 minutes later, that's the average, you stop talking, not because you're finished, but because you notice their eyes doing the things they do when they're being polite about something that stopped landing 2 minutes ago. And neither of you remembers a word of it by the following week, which is why you don't realize what an epidemic this is. Because nothing you said was false. It just never landed anywhere. It was never built to. It was assembled live under a little social pressure out of whatever pieces happened to be closest to hand. And some people torture you with it. Yeah, I mean, we've all been in the bar where you ask the guy, what do you do? And then like 15 minutes later, you want 3 more gin and tonics because he's telling you his life story, right? But most people believe storytelling is a gift that some people are born with. It's not a gift, it's a build. We teach it. You construct it once in private with nobody watching, no deadline, nothing. And then you carry it and you practice it and you get feedback and you carry it into every room for the rest of your career. And you can tweak it slightly based on the circumstances, but the same core things that open those 3 doors, right? Remember the 3 doors I had that open those 3 combination locks is in it. And you don't need to rebuild it because, like a bridge doesn't get rebuilt every time a car crosses it, right? And this skill is only available to somebody who's not scrambling for the next yes. A person who is scrambling for the big yes reaches for whatever version sounds the most impressive to this particular listener right now. And then it has to change every time because it was never built. So you got to think about this version, okay? Laura Louise in our MVP training does this beautifully done, okay? Because it's 3 parts: origin, epiphany, and vision. The middle one, actually, we borrowed from Russell Brunson, who named the turn from backstory to breakthrough the epiphany bridge. And I want to give credit where it's due, because the origin answers the question that everyone is silently asking before they trust a single word of your logic. Why should I trust the person in front of me? And it fails as soon as it becomes a resume. The epiphany is the specific moment something broke or clicked. And it fails, by the way, if it's vague. And it fails by having no cost attached to it. That's why I ran you through that example earlier. Count the cost, find the real cost. Because if nothing was risked in that moment, the listener has no reason to believe that it even mattered. And the vision, okay, over there, is what the world looks like if you are right in the present tense. It fails by grandiosity. Elon Musk can pull off the whole grandiose deals, okay? Not us. And it fails just as often because it's about you. The only vision that pulls anyone forward is the one where they can see their own business, their own life changed, or the people that are super important to them. And notice where your epiphany lives, right? It sits directly on top of one of the failures you were just sitting with 2 minutes ago. It's not a separate exercise. That was, you gathering raw material, basically what I asked you to do. 90 seconds sounds like a constraint imposed on you, and it's closer to a favor. Because left unlimited, right? Everyone pads their origin story with credentials, then they hedge the epiphany until it says nothing, and then they let the vision drift into abstraction because abstraction feels safer than conviction. And if you limit yourself to 90 seconds, the clock does not let you get away with any of that. You know that old saying, if I had more time, I'd write you a shorter letter? Making this long is easy. Making this short is the hard part. But if it runs long, the instruction is to cut, don't speak faster. Because speaking faster is what a person who's still improvising does. Cutting is what a person who has finished building the thing does. A story cannot deliver in 90 seconds. Let me rephrase it. A story that you can't deliver in 90 seconds is not a long story. It's an unfinished one. So let me progress and close this, because the best meeting I ever got, I got it because a meeting in London actually fell through, and I was really annoyed. I'm very German. I like punctuality. I'm very reliable. If I say I'm going to be there 6 months from now, that's it. But that's it. That's the whole origin story. Somebody canceled on me, and I had a hole in my week. And there was a man in Bahrain I'd been meaning to see. Sat at the pool at the Ritz-Carlton in Bahrain. That flat light out there that makes everything look freshly painted looks really beautiful. And across from me is a Kuwaiti investor who runs a 200-person team and hundreds of billions in assets. And we talked for 2 hours. We talked about raising kids across time zones, borders, private jets, the new iPad. Talked about skiing in Colorado and staying at the Little Nell. We talked which one of our mutual friends deserved admiration and which ones deserved a jail cell. On my fund, on my numbers, the actual pitch, 4 minutes by my own count. Okay. Before I flew home, I wrote him a letter by hand and had it delivered to his room. Monday morning, there's a fax. This is when we still used fax machines. On my desk, $50 million subscription. 2 weeks later, another fax with another 50. And I could tell you what the letter said and all this stuff. I'm not going to. Because anyone here who's ever built a due diligence checklist, right, will tell you that this should not be possible. $100 million in 4 minutes of numbers and 2 hours of small talk that looked nothing like business, right? But when I actually unbundle it and I tell you what actually happened, it's not luck and it's not charm. I didn't need that money. I mean, I didn't need the meeting. I needed the money. I absolutely needed the money, right? But I didn't specifically need him. And that meeting existed because another one had fallen apart. My week was full. There were other conversations. There were other moving things. He was not the only door. I was a moving train. I was going places, and he could feel that in the room before I opened my mouth, right? And because I didn't need him specifically, I didn't even have such a great focus on who he was. I just was 100% present, right, in those 2 meetings, and I could spend those 2 hours finding out exactly who I was instead of having to take 2 hours to prove who I was, okay? And that was really the whole part, because trust is not the slow variable that everyone assumes it is. It's just usually built badly, and it has a structure. 4 pillars, 2 for character and 2 for competence, right? Integrity, intent, capability, and results. Can't take credit for this. Stephen Covey's original work. The man is a genius, but all 4 of them have to be standing. And somebody who's not being trusted usually has 3 of them intact and cannot tell you which one is cracked. And you've got to learn to read the tell, because doubted integrity looks like somebody rereading the numbers you already showed them. Doubted intent looks like questions about your incentives. Doubted capability looks like questions about your team. Doubted results looks like a request for a smaller commitment first. So you have to diagnose this before you fix it. Somebody who thinks the problem is capability when the real doubt was always intent can spend a year hiring a better team and solve nothing, okay? You've got to think about this part, because the accelerant that almost nobody uses, because it looks kind of backwards, is you have to name your own downside before anybody else finds it. And this is the quickest way to find trust, because every deal has a real risk of it sitting inside of it somewhere. It doesn't matter how you dress it up, how you dress up the business, how you dress up anything. There's a real risk with everything that you're proposing, that you're selling, okay? There might be bad stuff in your background, a bad year, a client you fired, a partner who walked out, and most people bury it and they hope nobody asks. Somebody always asks, or worse, they find it themselves 3 weeks into due diligence and you already told them everything looked clean, or you pretended everything was clean, right? So whoever, and hear me on this point, whoever states the risk first owns the frame. And people just don't get this part. You own it, okay? Say it before they find it, and it reads as candor. Let them find it first, and the identical fact reads as concealment, and trust is gone. The information doesn't change. It's the order in which it arrives, okay? And it decides whether you look honest or evasive. And the reason why I put it in this talk and nowhere else is naming your own downside out loud, unprompted, is only survivable if you don't desperately need the deal. Do you see the connection? It's very, very powerful. And I wish I had an hour with you guys on this subject alone, because somebody who needs the yes desperately cannot afford to say the risky true thing. So if they soften it, or they bury it, or they wait to see if anybody notices, right? It's the first thing that only becomes available once the need is gone. So I really wanted to put that on your horizon today. And one more thing, because this one is a number. So our industry, we come from this, assets under management, okay? And that's what everybody is obsessed about, okay? And it's the figure on the pitch deck, the number goes on the wall, and it's the wrong number to watch because it describes what already happened, not what comes next, okay? But this one, the number that predicts the next raise, the next client, the next partner, is relationships under management. That is the count of real, live, two-way relationships that you're actually tending to. The people who would take your call, make an introduction, or come back around when they're finally ready. Because AUM is just a photograph of the past. RUM is a forecast. And when you change that focus, and there's some of you guys that I know personally in the room are excellent at this. Naturally, I am not. I have to work at this. Some of you guys are so good at this, but if you just made that the focus, all the money, all the success, everything would follow that. Because every dollar that has ever moved, traced back far enough, traces back to a relationship that somebody kept tending long before there was money on the table. So watch ROM instead of the AUM. See what I mean? The AUM tends to follow, usually with more zeros attached to it than the version you were actually chasing directly. And one honest thing before we leave that slide, look at the bottom line right there. I know I cut it off a little bit. I mean, manufactured urgency asks them to hurry, but real scarcity asks for nothing. It tells the truth about what's available and lets the truth do its own work. So people who have been chased their whole lives can tell the difference in about 4 seconds. So let me tell you about the ending of how this thing ended up in Tokyo. Because that was another room and another man in it the next day. This was in Toranomon, a beautiful conference room, 14 investors around this beautifully lacquered table. And I'm presenting. I have my business partner who's a simultaneous translator. And the men in front of me, okay, they are taking notes. They are furiously scribbling. And as the only Japanese can do, brato-san, and they're writing like crazy. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking, boy, I am just killing it. I am winning this room. But what I only learned later, that the man who mattered was this old guy all the way in the back, arms folded, eyes closed, not asleep, eyes closed. But I found out later, he was the only person in that room with the authority to say yes. The front row, they were there to report back what he had already decided. And he had decided somewhere around slide number 7. I didn't know that. I kept going. I talked for another 40 more slides to a room that had already closed. And I actually ended up walking out with nothing. Not a maybe, not a follow-up, just nothing. And for years, I thought about the deck that failed. And I rebuilt it on the flight home. I literally rebuilt it at 30,000 feet like an idiot. The deck was never in play. He did not decide against the numbers. He decided against the man. A man who spent the night before at 3 a.m. proving that he so desperately needed that room. And he was right. That was the only meeting I flew to Tokyo for. There was no other door. Every single thing about how I showed up that morning told him so before I said it in a single word. He wasn't reading my strategy. He was reading my arithmetic, okay? And that's the loop, okay? That is the loop. One last thing real quick before we go, because it's the one that nobody warns you about this, okay? You will build all of this, and then right on the edge of it working, you will break it yourself. It's the email that you leave sitting for 3 days for no reason that you can point to. The term that you reopen that was never actually the problem. The week that fills itself with busy work the moment a real win lands. And we all do this, okay? Don't feel guilty about it. But none of it feels like sabotage whilst it's happening. It feels like caution or thoroughness or a busy week. I actually have it here. We first learned it from here. It's the first time I read it and went really deep in it by Gay Hendricks. He calls it the giant upper limit problem. Because each of us carries an internal setting, right, for how much success we believe that we're allowed. And success arriving above that setting doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like danger. So the nervous system resolves the mismatch the only way it knows how to. It breaks the thing and pulls you back to the number that already felt safe. And you cannot fix this, by the way, with willpower, because willpower fights the behavior after the thermostat has already fired. You fix it by naming the number out loud before you get near it again. Because a vague feeling of too much wins every time. A named number can be examined and argued with and outgrown, okay? It really is. Think about your number. So, I want to end where we started. I gave you the short version of what I think is a deep, deep piece to read. But you will see when you read the book, it flows. It absolutely flows, right? Because when you think of my moment of like 3 a.m. in a hotel room, running through a deck for the 3rd time, some of you guys are doing your version of that this month. Some of you did it last week. And I want you to know that when you do it, you're not being thorough. You're telling the truth about your position to yourself in an empty room at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you're going to walk into a meeting and go tell it to somebody else before you open your mouth. And you don't fix that with a better deck. I tried that, right? I rebuilt mine at 30,000 feet. You don't fix it by doing yoga and relaxing and by pretending or getting good at the voice. I got very good at the voice, even as an introvert. It cost me a decade, right? You fix it by making sure that the room is never the only room. Because sure, I get it. You might need the capital, but you are not going to beg for it because there are others who will gladly jump on the opportunity. They just don't know you. You see what I mean? So go ahead, build that thing that makes you worthy, business A, but then build the thing over here that makes you not need a single yes, and that's business B, okay? it's in the code, okay? So everything that I've given you today is architecture, what it is and why it works. It's not the how, okay? The how doesn't all fit into 40 minutes, and I'd be lying to you if I pretended otherwise. A lot of the how is in the book. I'm going to give it to you. All 10 of them are in there with the build exercises at the end of every one of them. So you finish holding 10 things that you made instead of 10 things you read, right? And there is a framework in there that some of you have seen, have had access to, and I've got to credit Laura Louise to it. It's the greatest thing we've ever done. And that is the 5 rings of your authentic character flywheel. It really answers the question David could not answer as, who are you, right? So do me a favor, if you want to go right there right now, you can. I can get out the way, and 1 second, and you can literally take your phone and grab it right there, or you just text me. That's my personal phone number at the bottom, or go straight to that hyperlink, books.magnumvault.com, because it really costs you nothing. Obviously, your email address, but if you're here, you're already in our system, because I really want you to embrace this concept of stop chasing and start attracting. And I think it's such a gift when you do it and you realize that you actually have the power, and you had the power all the time. And we get ourselves so locked up and knotted up in things, but it's actually that simple. And it is such a gift. Laura Louise and I mean, this is what we do every day. We teach entrepreneurs, business owners, we build the systems, we teach them the tools, but then we took it to the next level where we found that we can teach this all day long, but people need the tools. And we're like, wow, let's just build them the tools. Let's give them the tools. And that's where our big calling came from, that we built this Magnum Vault Pass where, sure, you can come for the training, you can come for the mindset, you can come for all of this, but if you need the tool and I'm holding you back, I'm going to build the tool for you, and all the tools go in the vault. So any point you want to talk about that, I am very ready, willing, and able to answer those questions. Book a call with us, come and join us. But that was my gift for you guys today. Hopefully you found it engaging, you found it wonderful. I am really asking nicely. I need some reviews on the book. Just by a little text thing, text, email, LinkedIn, whatever works for you. Read the book and tell me what you think about it. If there's genuinely a mistake in it, point it out to me, because I wrote it in a hurry. I wanted it out there, and I wanted to get it out there, and my